to watch what is the first on a conversation that we will be having as a community, the first of many as we move forward in this great city together as one people. Before we get started, I'd ask Pastor Jenkins to offer us a invocation, if he would. Pastor Jenkins?
Father, we just ask for your presence to be with us. The scripture is very plain that if any man lack wisdom, we should ask. And so, Lord, we collectively, at the mayor's behest, we ask for your wisdom so that we might lead this community. Lord, we just pray for reconciliation. You have given each of us the ministry of reconciliation, those of us that are believers. And so, Lord, use us as your agents. We have an unprecedented moment. Lord, life can be summed up at times with moments collectively. And so, Lord, in this moment, we ask for your strength, your wisdom, your empowerment, so that we don't fail to seize this moment. Lord, we believe you for not momentary emotional platitudes, but we believe you for long-term sustainable strategies that will bring flourishing to this community. Thank you for our mayor. We ask your blessing, your hand upon him and all of the servants, civil servants that serve our community. We ask you to continue to prosper and bless them. And Lord, help us to heal our city, bring unity and oneness, and as I said, flourishing. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Jenkins. Okay, again, thank you, everybody that has tuned in, and I want to open this discussion by acknowledging the circumstances in which we're meeting. It is absolutely critical that we urgently convene this conversation, but it is problematic that we are doing so in the wake of George Floyd's murder at the hands of Minneapolis police. While it's meaningful and important for us to not let one more tragic death pass without taking a deep look inside police reforms, I want to acknowledge that we should have convened this conversation much sooner, under different circumstances, and we are sorry that we did not. I've watched as some elected officials across the country have attempted to parse this situation. They point fingers at Minneapolis and they say that the situation is somehow isolated. But we know that systematic patterns of white supremacy and racism are not isolated, and that the implicit and explicit bias remain frustratingly persistent across our country to this day. We also know that we have a moral imperative as individuals and as a community to do the work here and to approach this issue with an open mind, open hearts, and a posture of contrition. I'll speak briefly about some of the work that we've done in recent years, acknowledging and understanding that while it shows important progress, it's not enough. And we have to remain open to reforms and to reinvestments. At a high level, one of the refrains that has emerged from the Floyd's murder has been the call for city governments to make investments in areas outside of law enforcement to better address issues upstream instead of having law enforcement be the back-end response mechanism. These services include things like youth recreation, prevention, education, and nonprofit partnerships, which can often result in better outcomes, a safer community, and fewer overall law enforcement calls. Many in our community have called, emailed, and have sent letters to my office regarding what we are doing and what we have done to bring about change. I wanted to provide some deeper information and give you an update. And while we still have a lot of progress to make, I want to acknowledge a body of recent work in Gresham to advance our prevention and engagement efforts. I also want to acknowledge that Gresham's police staffing is traditionally and comparatively very low relative to other agencies. In Oregon, Gresham's police staffing ratio is the 15th lowest statewide. Additionally, the proposed budget that will go before the council next week for adoption includes a reduction of 6 sworn officers. In recent years, outside of our police services or in concert with the police department, we've made investments in families. We started a late-night youth basketball program for middle schoolers and high schoolers. We created regular weekend futsal programming. We put city-owned land on the table to help bring partners like Boys and Girls Club, Friends of the Children, And we also opened up City Hall for family and friends mentoring right in City Hall. Additionally, we've established civilian homeless service specialists. We've created embedded civilian behavioral health team with the police department, and we've hired civilian gang outreach and prevention workers in partnership with POIC. None of the programs I just mentioned existed in Gresham even a decade ago. We have moved in the right direction, but we know that a lot of work remains ahead of us all, and that we also need to review everything from the use of force policies to collective bargaining agreements, and we need to push the state legislature help with collective bargaining and police reforms as well. To that end, I immediately signed President Obama's Commitment to Action pledge when it was introduced last week. The pledge commits us to review police use of force policies. It engages the community by including a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories in the, for review. And it requires us to report the findings and review it with the community to seek feedback and ultimately reform our use of force policies. We've already begun to embark on the first action, a review of the Gresham Police Department use of force policies. You may have heard about the 8 Can't Wait campaign that has elevated 8 specific interventions to help stem police violence in America. That campaign is based on community demands and policy recommendations from research organizations and President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. Here's what we have found in regards to the Gresham Police Department's use of force on those 8 policies. Number 1, chokehold and strangleholds. They are not allowed in situations where deadly force is authorized. They are not allowed except in situations where deadly force is authorized. Number 2, de-escalation is required. Officers are required to de-escalate situations where possible. The department's scenario-based training provides officers the opportunity to use de-escalation techniques such as using dialogue to calm a situation. These scenarios also help our officers learn when de-escalation is not appropriate, such as in dynamic and evolving incidents where there is increased risk to the public. Number 3, require warning before shooting. The Gresham Police Department trains officers to identify themselves and give warnings if possible. However, our current policy maintains that in some situations there is not sufficient time to give warnings. Number 4, exhaust all alternatives before shooting. Gresham Police Department officers are trained to use deadly force when there are no appropriate alternatives. In the last 21 years, Gresham Police Department officers have been involved in 5 officer-involved shootings that have resulted in the death of the suspect. The department reports that there are thousands of incidents each year which officers are legally justified to use deadly force, but officers do not. Number 5, duty to intervene. Gresham Police Department officers are required to intervene and stop excessive force and report these incidents immediately to a supervisor. Gresham Police Department officers are also trained to recognize these circumstances and intervene before excessive force is used. Number 6, shooting at moving vehicles. Officers may only discharge a firearm at a moving vehicle or its occupants when the officer reasonably believes there are no other reasonable means available to avert the threat of the vehicle, or if the deadly force other than the vehicle is directed at officers or others. Use of force continuum. Number 7, the Gresham Police Department does not describe its use of force policies as a continuum. Many years ago, a continuum was used, but the department found that it created a situation where every scenario or event could not be addressed, and it proved confusing for the public. Again, however, officers are required to de-escalate situations when possible. This item may need some additional exploration. Number 8, comprehensive reporting required. Officers must complete a report each time they use force, which is reviewed by an officer's immediate supervisor, their watch commander, their supervising captain, the chief of police, and survival skills trainers. Again, that is a summary of where we are right now, not necessarily an endorsement of any specific approach. I also want to reference the Statistical Transparency of Policing report from the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, which was published on November 25th of last year. This report, which is required by the state legislature, reviews pedestrian and traffic stop data from all Oregon law enforcement agencies and searches for potential bias in the statistics that are revealed. The Gresham Police Department compared favorably in the report, showing that there were no statistically significant racial disparities in pedestrian and traffic stops on any of the 3 analytical methods used in the study. deeper in that data, there are still opportunities to get better. And we will continue as a community to examine those and get better together. But the CJC data and the 8 Can't Wait review, again, are just a start. In the coming days and months, we will continue conducting a comprehensive review not only of our police department's use of force policies, but also their past efforts and future plans to build relationships and trust with the Black community. And we cannot do that without everybody's help, and that's why we're here today. We know that this work is already overdue and that it must commence urgently in our community. To that end, we have assembled a panel of prominent Black leaders to share their perspectives, their feedbacks, and their ideas for our community. We're here to listen. I also want to acknowledge that this panel is the first of many conversations that will occur with Black leaders in our community. Our senior manager, Larry Morgan, has been assembling names for additional conversations and is also urgently stepping up to lead our rebooted effort at City Hall to engage the diversity, equity, inclusion work on a citywide basis. If you're interested in continued conversations, please email larry.morgan@greshamoregon.gov or call at 503-956-4245. In a moment, I'm going to ask a couple of my partners on the City Council to share some remarks, but before I turn it over, I do want to briefly introduce the panel that we've assembled. We're very fortunate to be joined today by our school district leaders. Centennial School District Superintendent Paul Coakley is here. Gresham Barlow Superintendent Carice Pereira is here. We're also joined by community leader Jermaine Flentroy. Thank you, Jermaine, for joining us today. We're also pleased to have outstanding young leader Shamar Lennox, who leads the Stand Up Gresham movement, which has organized some pretty powerful rallies in Gresham. Thank you for being here. And also I introduced briefly Pastor Jenkins from East Hill Church. He has been a great ally to the city and the community in finding ways to help during COVID, and his congregation. We want to thank them for that, and thank you for being here. We're also very fortunate to be joined by Reverend Ed Mondene, the president of the NAACP of Portland, and J.W. Matt Hennessy with the Vancouver Avenue First Baptist Church is here also. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for engaging in this conversation. I now want to turn it over to my colleagues on the City Council. At this point, I'll turn it over to Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, Mayor Bemis, and to my fellow panelists, thank you for being here. Thank you for this conversation. I apologize. I will get through this. I have had the honor and privilege to serve on the Gresham City Council for about 12 years now. I have seen great change. A lot of good things happen, but we have not been transformative. And that is becoming very, very real. I want to tell you a very quick story about a dear friend of mine, and I'm going to name her Hannah because probably everybody knows her. But Hannah is younger than I, much younger. She lives in Gresham, has her whole life. She identifies as Asian. And we were talking the other day, and I asked her, "How are you?" And she's never been one to really talk about those kinds of things. But I said, has things changed for you in this community since all of this? And she said, yes. And she gave me several examples, starting with COVID-19 being identified as the Chinese plague. She has taken horrendous verbal abuse while being in the community as a result of that. And now, in the tumultuous times that we're in, compounded, she's experiencing even more. She's one of the dearest, sweetest people you could ever know. Giving, 100% giving. She works for pennies on the dollar to contribute to her community because it's her heart and soul. She was at, I'm going to say it, she was at Fred Meyer this last weekend in Gresham. And a couple approached her with their masks on, and they had an empty bass cart. And they approached her, and she thought, you know, it happened so quickly. She thought, oh, they're giving me their empty bass cart. And when they got up to her, the man said to her, "Go back to your own country. You don't belong here." She's afraid to go out. She's afraid to go to Fred Meyer. She finds herself avoiding any possible situation that could be threatening to her. And I know that she, Hannah, is just one small example of what happens day in and day out here in this community, and it is not something that I experienced, and certainly not something that I've been fully aware of. My colleagues on the City Council have been working on a statement of truth, intention, and commitment. I've received feedback from all but one of the councilors, so it is not in its final form. But I do want to read it now. We have a goal, I believe, of adopting this on Tuesday once we have everyone's input. But I do want to read it now as a draft, if that'd be okay with you all. We acknowledge and own our role as leaders in this community to respond affirmatively and without excuse to the call for systemic change that roots out and challenges the status quo of racism, bigotry, intolerance, and discrimination. We commit to inclusion and welcome into our community all those who share this basic human value. We unequivocally condemn any form of hatred. We stand up against injustice through our words, writings, and actions. We aspire to understand through listening, observing, and doing our homework. We vow to seek truth and transparency regardless of how difficult it may be. We pledge to uncover and challenge all instances of implicit bias within our organization. We place education and training as the cornerstone of our commitment to meaningful and lasting change. We welcome peaceful demonstrations in our community. We steadfastly commit to the long and arduous road ahead, and we declare our collective and individual responsibility to do this transformative work. I look forward to my colleagues here on the panel and to our community to hold us accountable to this. Thank you, Mayor.
You, Councilor Echols. Councilor Palmero.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Echols, for sharing your story. Very powerful. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for coming. I want you to know, first off, that you have an ally within the mayor and the city council. I mean, records speak for themselves. The mayor's always been very supportive. But as we look at this, and as I'm thinking about this conversation about reconciliation, how do we make things better? It always seems that something has to happen, and I think the mayor's right. We should have had this conversation a long time ago. But it seems like always something has to happen before we sit down and talk, and we need to change that. And thinking about that, I mean, we have a growing African American community in East County, in Gresham, and what can we do as a city to help the African American community? And I just top of my head, just thinking maybe we could offer land or buildings where African American, culturally specific communities can build their nonprofits, so they can make decisions for their community as they see fit, or maybe ensuring that our positions in the city reflect our community in terms of the number of diverse groups. Even being paid for consultations like this. I mean, the African American community needs to be paid for what they do. And hopefully next time we have this conversation that you're all paid to come down and help us through this process. But this is just some thoughts. I'd like to hear your thoughts about what we can do as a city.
Good. Thank you, Councilor Palmero. At this point, next is Superintendent Dr. Catrice Pereira.
Thanks, Mayor.
Just hit talk on there you go.
Yes, sorry. Not used to talking up here much in our meetings. Thank you for inviting me and having me here today. I've often said a lot of the roots of any problem that we have really truly in America begins in our classrooms. And many people say, well, that should begin at home. Well, yes, but I don't control home. I'm a superintendent of a school system, and we have to begin there. And so our school system is trying to take steps towards ensuring that our curriculum is reflective of our students in our buildings. And no matter how large or small those culturally specific groups are, we're trying to make sure that we do that. We spent some time also with our staff, our teachers, over the last year and a half. This is my third year here as superintendent. And I've had great pleasure of serving this community. But about a year and a half ago, we began professional training and development for culturally specific teaching and learning, so that our teachers are able to respond and ensure that their students feel welcome, and they understand not only the cultural aspects of a student, but their social and political pieces as well, because I think that's important. It's good to know about the culture, but it's also good to know about the social and political pieces, which have brought us here today. You have to understand those things and be sensitive of those. And since I've been here in Oregon, there's been a lot of rhetoric about diversifying staff, and I say yes to that, but I say let's work with what we have first, right? And we're also trying to ensure that we are cognizant of who we're hiring as well, because I also am very much aware that representation matters in a classroom for a student. And, you know, this is not Catrice's anecdotal piece. There's lots of research that points to the fact that when students have educators who look like them and can understand them on various different levels, they will perform better. But the reality is we are in Oregon, and I understand that there are droves of people, diverse people coming to Oregon looking for jobs, which is why I go back to my original point. Let's work with what we have as well, to ensure that they're prepared. And we've not had any pushback from that. We've been working with the Lewis and Clark Center for Equity and Inclusion as well, and the majority of our staff has also gone through that training, including my cabinet. We actually began in December, actually, and we're continuing even through COVID. They're virtual, rather than be in person, but it is what it is. But I will end by saying this, is that what happens in our classrooms is good for our locality, it's good for our state, and ultimately good for our country as a whole. So I will go back to the statement of it has to begin with us in the classrooms. We can help with ensuring that students are not going outside of our classroom doing things that they shouldn't do, because if we can teach them those things in a classroom, it's so much better. And I say invest in kids. So that you don't have to take care of them when they become adults. So.
Thank you, Dr. Pereira. Jermaine Flintroy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. And this is a very interesting moment in time for all of us. But for this moment in time, I want to keep this direct and straight. I want to say how, why, and now. We got some understanding what we should be doing. We shouldn't be asking anymore. Like, we got some clear understanding, some clear askings that I think we already know. Like, I don't know why we sit here having words and disputing. We already know what's going on. We're playing divide and conquer right now. We right here and we understand what's going on out here in the city of Gresham. We have been doing this work. We don't need to be asking how to do this work. We understand it. All of us know what we're doing out here. Now it's time to show us, do you really care for us? Is it about us, or are we going to keep playing this talk? This is direct to the city of Gresham. Direct. Honestly, what we're going to do, right? I just met that young man just today and tell him we got the program that's helped saving kids' lives. We work with the police. We make sure. But that's a make-believe relationship. Are we going to keep this 100 and make sure all matters? Do our kids count, or are we playing games? We want a human right that no kid die out here. No black person die. It ain't going to be asked no more. We're demanding right now. Straight up. You and I both know there's good cops and there's bad cops right here in the city of Gresham. What are we going to do about it? That's our demand. What are we going to do about it? Right here. If we're going to stand up and make this fair, the resources must come to the community. It's a must they come to the community so we can make sure our young men have guidance. We always say that. He's just like the superintendent said. He needs people to look like him to really feel him, to guide him. That's simple. Because if he don't get that, he'll be confused. That's understood down here. We already got that. We already got programs. We already got organizations. They need to be funded so we can make sure we have a resilient. We build things like, we already know this. Like this conversation, we got to keep this 100. We have to keep this 100 going forward. For this day, we're going to demand what we need out here. And we're not going to ask, we're going to demand. As much as well, I got much respect for you, Chief Sales, we're demanding now. All right? That's our conversation. Our next conversation will get redder and redder to see if we can hold you accountable. So we just don't have talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Jermaine. I appreciate your comments. I hear you, and I hear you.
Because I'm hurt. I'm worried about my kid. I'm hurt, right? I got a 19-year-old son. I'm hurt. I don't want to run out of the house and worry about if he's going to get killed. Everybody knows. He's a public kid. He does respect. We get that. I don't want to worry about if he's going to die. That's not what I got a 46-year-old. Right? Due to what? That's a human right. If you don't worry about your kid going to die, you can make your kid. I don't worry about my kid going to die, not die.
Thank you for having me. And I also, I just want to say, just like Jermaine, I'm worried for my son. I'm worried for every single African-American student that walks through our doors that is in the city. It's in the city of Portland. I also agree with my colleague, Catrice. We're doing the same work. We work a lot together, and we've brought a lot of diverse leadership to our districts, and we'll continue to work on that. But the main thing that I want to talk about outside of that is it does start in the schools with educating and keeping kids safe. And I want to talk about the K12 funding. I know the economy based on COVID-19 has really took a hit. And before that, all districts were in the place of working on plans through SSA to really close and eliminate the achievement gap between our students of color and disproportionate discipline and achievement. And now, based on the impact of COVID-19, we're looking at laying off staff, cutting programs, and really things that aren't going to benefit our students, especially during this difficult time. And I think that's something that we all need to be pushing towards, fully advocating for K12 funding. Our students, we need our programs to continue. We need more support for our students. We need to close the gap. Just because we're in a pandemic doesn't change the fact that we need to educate our students and get them to graduation and beyond. And it's not going to happen with trying to do more with less. And this distance learning, I've seen educators step up across the state, all educators. I've seen people try to engage students as much as possible, and not everyone learns that way. And I feel like our students are losing ground right now. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Coakley. Shamar Lennox, Stand Up Gresham Movement.
So I'm just going to go ahead and share what I've written down for you guys today. Some of the topics that I'm speaking on, Mayor Bemis has touched on them already, and a lot of you guys have already said things. So I'm just gonna go ahead. First, I would like to thank Mayor Bemis for inviting us here today, and thank you all for being here and giving us a chance to speak and be the voice for our community. I would like to say that everything I'm about to speak on today is all for educational purposes and to get the world and everybody in this room to understand. That being said, I would like to say, when somebody says Black Lives Matter, they are not saying all lives don't matter. When somebody says Black Lives Matter, that should be looked at as a cry for help. Black people all over the world are saying Black Lives Matter to get you to hear their cry. Black people are simply trying to say, hey, My life matters too. It is not to be disrespectful, but it's to shed light on what's happening right now in America. When you say all lives matter, that is changing the topic and avoiding something that drastically needs to be talked about and brought to light. Now I'm just going to list some facts that I have looked up, and this is cited from the Washington Post. So it's time to get into the facts of what's going on in America right now. In 2019, 1,003 people were shot and killed by the police. That's just shot and killed by the police. That doesn't mean, they weren't beaten or not. They're just shot. That was cited from the Washington Post. Now, this is a source from mappingpoliceviolence.org. They state that there were 1,098 people killed by police in 2019 total. That being said, I think it's safe to say that based on these numbers, there needs to be some major police reform happening right now. Black people were 24% of those killed in 2019, despite making up 13% of the population. Reflecting back to the history of police, let's not forget that they started out as slave patrol in 1704. A lot of people don't know that, but history has a tendency to repeat itself, and it's safe to say it looks like we are moving backwards instead of forward, so we need to fight to continue to move forward. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. Black people are also 1.3 times more likely to be killed unarmed than white people. Did you know that 99% of killings from police in 2013 through 2019 have not resulted in officers being charged with the crime? So where's the accountability at for police? What we want, this is proposals pretty much shared from me and Jalen, the other leader of the Gresham stand-up movement, and also people from our community. So all officers required to have body cams on during public contact. Failure to do so results in a charge to the officer of evidence tampering or felony charges. Body cams are there for the officer's safety, but they're also there for public safety and need to be treated as such. Next thing is regular mental health evaluations of officers in contact with the public. This is important because if an officer is not mentally prepared to be in the field, then he does not need to be in the field. Next thing I'm touching on is independent review of use of deadly force from 2010 through 2020. This is important to build public trust because the police being transparent with us is the first step of many more to come. The mayor, you already touched on this, but mandatory training and de-escalation techniques for officers. It is important for officers to know how to de-escalate the situation because it saves somebody from potentially being killed. All officers required to have a taser. Me personally, I think this is important because a taser can shoot anywhere from 15 to 31 feet. This means officers would have a less lethal solution opposed to grabbing their gun, which could prevent somebody from getting killed. Mandatory training and classes on racial profiling. This is important because if police are taught what this is in depth, then it could potentially eliminate it from happening. Jurisdictions should make their policies and procedures that their officers have to follow available to the public. This is important because the public can then hold cops accountable for their actions and fight for justice. Jurisdictions should release statistical data annually related to arrest-related deaths and arrest-related hospitalization injuries within each jurisdiction. This is important as well because it's holding cops accountable and giving criticism to see where they can improve. Next thing is make body cam footage available to the public in cases of arrest-related death and arrest-related hospitalizations. Doing this gives the public a better chance at holding our law enforcement accountable for their actions and provides evidence of what happened for transparency. Cops need to keep their partners in check. If you see somebody doing wrong, you need to stop fellow officers from doing wrong. This is a major difference maker because it saves somebody from being unjustly beaten or murdered. Failure to stop your partner or responding officers from doing wrong should result in termination or criminal charges. That's all I have for police reform. I'm moving on to a couple thoughts of mine for school reform and ideas for schools. We have a lot of superintendents in here, so I'm just going to throw out some ideas for you guys. If teachers are aware of discrimination and don't do anything about it, they need to be terminated effective immediately. I know schools promote anti-bullying and anti-discrimination, but not anti-racism. I feel like this personally has to change. Barlow High School has American outs and hick outs. Barlow High School is also known for being openly racist. The school board needs to ban American outs and hick outs effective immediately so students, viewers, and players feel safe and respected at games. Principals need to enforce zero tolerance for racism in their schools. If they've been informed about racist comments or outbursts by students and don't do anything, they need to be terminated immediately. If a student makes racist remarks, the school needs to expel them immediately. This is establishing a new standard in our schools so minorities feel safe when they go to school and don't have to worry about getting harassed. This is the last thing I'm going to share. Schools need to have mandatory classes on racism and white privilege. This is important because if our peers understand where the people around them are coming from, they can stick up for them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamar. Pastor Jenkins.
Thank you, Mayor. It's an honor to be here with all of the panelists. Let me acknowledge right out of the gate something that maybe many of you don't know. I've been in the community for 6 months, and I still feel like I'm in an introductory stage. So for me, being here this afternoon is furthering my education on our community leaders, strengths and weaknesses of our city strategy. I want you to consider East Hill a community partner, someone that we've tried initially during the crisis to make sure that we're positioned to do everything that we can to serve the communities, those that are disadvantaged, those that are underserved. And so in that regard, we're going to continue that effort and hope to strengthen that partnership. Now, while I've only been in the community for 6 months pastoring, I have been a black man in America for 54 years. And so there is a journey that I've had as well. And it's amazing to me that I grew up in East Baltimore. It's amazing to me to hear some of the same needs for the African American community that we were espousing some 30 years ago. Even to the point of midnight basketball that I hear someone saying, I played midnight basketball in East Baltimore to stay off the streets and away from drugs and violence. But I would say this, I've pastored in Eugene, Oregon, and now in the Portland metro area for roughly about 16, 17 years. And in our transition to try to move to East County, my wife had an experience that sort of allowed me to understand where we were moving to. We contacted a homeowner. Everything seemed fine over the phone until my wife showed up on the front steps. Noticed that there were 2 cars in the driveway and could hear people moving around in the house, but the door was not open to her. We could only interpret that as being that someone saw who we were, what ethnic group we belonged to, and somehow did not want us to rent, lease their property. And so that's just a small experience that we've had. I've had numerous experiences with police in Oregon. My son is a 6'4", 300 and some odd pound African-American young man who routinely gets stopped he seems to fit the description a lot in Eugene, Oregon, and likewise for me in the Portland area. And so for me, I represent a diverse church, a relatively large church. We have law enforcement officers in our church. We have everyone, and increasingly I've been told that our church is becoming browner by the weeks, and some of that has to do with the affinity that some feel to my leadership. But so I represent this coalition of diversity in our church, and I would say to you that we want to be part of the solution. I want you to look to us, lean on us for counsel, and not necessarily even in the public forum. I'm not a soundbite type of person, so when you need us, we will be there. You don't always have to put me on front and center to advocate. And so I'm here to learn. So when I hear Jermaine's pain, when I see and hear, I have several friends that are Asian American who have had likewise similar experiences. I think what we're lacking is simple human decency. We're not seeing humane treatment. For those of us that espouse our faith, we espouse what Paul wrote in Ephesians 2 of a new humanity. One that is characterized by love, that distinguishes even the differences. Though we're not uniform in thought or strategy, we maintain a heart for unity and oneness. And so that's what I bring to the table for us, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor. And now, E.D. Modene.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be in this space with all of you. This is probably one of the most important times of our generation. We're in the middle of a revolution. There's been a reset button pushed, and it's not going to get unpushed. And we're going to have to understand that Jermaine's pain is not just a pain, it's a reality. It is tragic when a race of people arrives at the realization that they are powerless. Powerlessness is the worst form of oppression. It drives people to perpetuate not only their own sufferings, but that of others. In America, where black people continue to find themselves powerless, our community often doesn't see the point of participating in what we call the great democratic process. There's a convincing narrative that suggests we will never win the struggle, and that our participation serves no impactable purpose. This despondency in the attitude towards democratic institutions manifests itself in many ways, including depressed, voter turnouts everywhere, and a lack of voice in the public square. We live in a time that perhaps more than ever calls for us to rally our courage to be better and to do better. Our COVID era exercises in social distancing still provides us an opportunity for us to tighten our social bonds. And now more than any time in recent history, our community must summon the level of effort we displayed during the civil rights era. We must unify and bolster our capacity for effective organization. This need is very plain to see. We've heard it echoed by people on this panel all morning. Since the start of this pandemic, high-profile tragedies for the black community have continued unabated, playing out in the national news. As our community continues to be terrorized, I began to ponder whether we are still de facto 3/5 human. I admit that there was a brief time in space that I had more optimistic reasons to think that we were going to get better. I maintained a regular hope in the potential for progress. In our centuries-old fight for equality and inclusion, I'm hoping that there is still opportunity. But as time goes on, those hopeful thoughts in the best of mankind have been dashed against the harsh rocks of reality that exist in these United States, reaching the same conclusion as would any other observer, that racism, my beloved friends, my beloved community, is still alive and well, albeit often found in the form of politically polished and politeness. Systemic institutionalization of white supremacy exists. And as I close this portion of my statement, I say unto you, my friends, and those that listen, that it is not incumbent of any black man, black woman, or black child to lift up the voice of fight for racism. That fight belongs to our fellow constituents that bear a different skin tone. Albeit you have these conversations in the public square, it is time that we had these conversations at our dinner tables, with our wives and our husbands and our children, with our parents and our cousins and our aunts and our uncles, when we hear the freedom to insist that the ways of thinking in our families must change, we'll see a push that we have never seen before. It is time for us to rise up our heads and begin to understand that the two diseases that plague us right now are real: COVID-19 and racism 2020. Thank you for having me here today. I'm glad to be here as your friend, your ally, your accomplice, and most importantly, your brother.
Thank you very much, sir. J.W. Matt Hennessy.
Thank you, Brother Mayor, and to all of those who are panelists. I have really thoroughly appreciated everything that everyone's had to say. Brother Mayor, you are a wise man to end this with 3 preachers, because if you had let us go first, nobody else may have gotten an opportunity to speak at all. To those that are listening as well, I'm humbled and honored to be a part of this conversation today. But I want to say today that my remarks, I pray you will listen to through the lens of a father, a grandfather, a former global leader at Nike, a former CEO of a company in Lake Oswego, a former public safety director in Michigan, former city manager in Michigan, former leader of International Preschool Education Foundation, present leader of Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, present convener of the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative that's been working with the Portland Police Bureau for many years, present pastor, CEO, and senior servant of historic Vancouver Avenue First Baptist Church in Portland, godchild of Coretta Scott King, Dr. King's wife, for 20 years. Have lived in Oregon more than half my life. I've given 32 years of my life to this region. I have been fighting this battle of suffocation, of racism, for more than, or all of my life, but 32 years here in Oregon. And so today, to preface my remarks, I'm really thinking and moved by the statements of history. One is President Anwar Sadat, as I had the honor of being across the street in Lafayette Park when the Camp David peace accords were signed between him and the Prime Minister of Israel and our president at that time, Jimmy Carter. I was a college kid, but I was across the street, and I will never forget, President Sadat said, "This is the happiest day of my life." I watched, as a college student, President Ronald Reagan stand at the Berlin Wall and say, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." That inspiration today is exactly what me going. Somebody sent a message, "I want to know that you're all right." I said, I am, as all of us are, working from beginning of the morning, as was it Malcolm X that said, can't see in the morning till can't see at night. I said, but what fuels me is hope. We are right where we belong. I am not only hopeful, Jermaine, and everybody on this panel, I am absolutely clear that God has spoken, and that indeed this midnight in this country and in all over the world, this midnight is beginning to see a brand new dawn. I say to you as a leader in higher education, as I've spent 13 years of my life in a seminary board and a private educational school in Santa Barbara, I believe that this is the time that Goliath will die. Y'all didn't hear me, so I'll say it again. I know I'm not preaching to Vancouver Avenue, but Goliath must die. Every Goliath must die. Racism is that Goliath as well. It is suffering right now. And Brother Mayor, our prayers for you is your safety, because the white power structure is not willing to give up that easily. It's going to fight you. And I want you to know that we are your brothers and sisters. We're going to fight alongside you. We're not going to abandon you. But I want you and the City Commission to know you are embarking on something that, while there are plenty of people that support you, there are plenty of people that do not want to see this succeed. I have members, my church is in Portland, I've got a bunch of members that are here that live in Gresham and make their home here, which is why I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. But I also want to go beyond police reform. What I know is that there are plenty of great police officers, and I want to say that for the record. I work with them. I talk with them. I've been working with them, been riding along with them, been working on policy with them for a long time. There are also some bad apples. Let me pause for a minute. There's some bad preachers too. There's some bad politicians as well. So let's not just say they're bad police officers. There's some bad everywhere, okay? But what I want to say is that as we do this work, we have said to the world that no longer are we going to be afraid to go places. There are states in this union that, if we're honest, those who are black and brown, we wouldn't even dare go to them because we realize that we would not necessarily be safe. There are places in Oregon that we would not go to after the sun goes down without giving it great consideration. But I also want to say that I'm grateful for the words that you have shared and others, Mr. Mayor, have shared about nonprofit work. But I need to, as a former business leader, understand that's not enough. Part of the problem of this country is economic empowerment, and it is completely lopsided when 1% of the people own 99% of the wealth.
Amen.
Something is wrong with that. So I want to say to business leaders everywhere, all over this country, make the space for people that don't look like you in your organizations, at your boardroom table, at your, and not just in diversity and inclusion. Believe me, trust me, don't anybody get me wrong, that's important. When I went to Nike, they tried to offer me a job in HR. 4 jobs, they said. 3 of them were in HR. I said, well, I don't want any of those. I want the job that's right in the center of your work and what you do. That is important. We must force, demand, as has been said here today, the business community to quit hiding behind the walls and recognize that you will also increase your brand equity by making sure that you make decisions that are consistent with diversity and inclusion. Police officers, you want us, that if we see something, you want us to tell it or say something, we need you to do the same thing. We need you to recognize that as busy as you are, get out of your car and say something to the people around you. I'm grateful from Rodney King to where we are today that people start filming stuff. Because see, I'm convinced that if we had not seen the film of what happened to Mr. Floyd, that would have been covered up. Y'all may not agree with me, but I'm telling you right now that it's amazing to me how many things have been covered up because there is no film. And something's desperately wrong with the grand jury system, when an officer can go into the grand jury system and clearly say, I felt my life was threatened, and that is the hook that gets them off from whatever activity was on the street. That must also die. And so I say, as one local leader of a large governmental unit called and asked me what I thought, I said, here's what I want you to do. I said, you've got black and brown people that work for you that have felt suffocated, just like the metaphor of that officer's knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. They felt and have had to conform because the white power structure has made us do that. They can't tell you what they really feel because they're worried about losing their job. But I want you to be courageous enough to go talk to them. I want you to be courageous enough to tell them you will not lose your job, and that you will talk not only to them but their supervisors, or that you will talk with leadership and help them help you understand. And I say this to you, Brother Mayor, and I say this to everyone who's listening. Talk with your people. I promise you, if you make it safe, they're going to tell you the truth about the injustices that they have seen and that they live with every day, but they don't say anything because they've got children that have to go to college. They've got car payments and mortgage payments that they have to make.
Say it again.
They recognize that they need to be in a safe space, but I need you, we need you, to open up the doors of conversation so they can tell you exactly how it is.
Exactly.
And don't hide behind the statement. In fact, I pray that this statement will die too, and that is, I'm not a racist. This ain't about whether you're a racist or not. The reality is, are you willing to work hard to make sure that there is equity and justice all over the place? An opportunity for people for you to quit getting defensive when somebody calls you a racist. What you don't know, and what I know and you know, is that what people think of you has absolutely nothing to do with what you think. It has to do with what they have experienced on the other side of you. You may not have meant to be racist, but your actions have been racist. And it's important to be able to say, I am as guilty as anybody else. Please talk to your employees. Please talk to your residents. Please open this conversation to business leaders. Please continue to open it to police and fire and others, and be willing to take the courageous steps intentionally to make this happen. I'm just about done. Pastors need 3 closes, but that's the first one. When I was a city manager, I will never forget when I asked the IAFF, why don't we have any women in the fire service? And they said, and I won't give you all the stuff, they said, because our wives would be uncomfortable with that. I said, well, that's crazy. I threw that out the window because they had to sleep in the same dormitory. I said, what are the problems? Because there have been women who have applied to be a fire person, but why don't they get through? They said, well, what we found is that they don't pass the obstacle course. I said, great, do me a big favor. I said, I want you to put the obstacle course together, and I want you, the union, you pick any of your firefighters and have them go out, and I want them to do the obstacle course. They happen to be all men, and they happen to be all Caucasian, and they took them through the obstacle course, and you can imagine what happened. They all failed. I said, so what you have created is a barrier. I said, we have 4 positions open right now, and I'm not going to fill 2 of those positions unless you've got women who will come through and be hired. And you can take me to mediation, you can take me to arbitration. I don't care what you do. We have created the barrier that they will not get through. So you need to toss out the obstacle course. Long story short, we found 2 women to be hired. But it took force. It took courage. to say, this is what we're going to do. Brother Mayor, I say to you, as a public official, your words are great. I believe you. I feel you. But I want you to take the courage to do what's necessary, and it's going to take that. Finally, my friends, as we do this work, I pray John 17, as Jesus made his prayer to God, that they would be one, talking about the disciples and by extension all of us, that they will be one as we are one. It's God's force, and if you are not a person of faith, I promise you today, this work can't be done if what you are doing is assuming that you've got all the ability to do it on your own. We do not. You need a force bigger than you. So I would just ask you and beg you as a Baptist pastor, but really a child of God, that whether you choose to be Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Sikh, whatever it is that you feel called to do, you need a higher power, because that's the only way we're not only going to get this, but stick with this and make the revolutionary change that needs to be made. I hear the voice of the woman at the end of the Montgomery bus boycott, that she refused to take a ride in the taxi cab, a grandmother walking to work in the hot Montgomery sun. And when the cab driver tried to force her to get in the cab and tell her she would not have to pay, she insisted on walking. And she said, when he asked her, why are you walking when you can get a free ride? She said, my feet is tired, but my soul is at rest. Today, my friends, we've started a journey. It's going to be a hard one, but we're going to walk this journey together. And our feet may get tired, but I pray our soul will always be at rest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your powerful words. Thank you. I thank everybody for their frankness, their openness, the discussion. I also thank you for the accountability mechanism. I hear you. I hear all of you in terms of accountability. Words are great, but we got work to do, right? And I'm committed to doing that work. I know that our council is absolutely committed to doing that work. And we will do it. And we will do it as a community together. And that's the only way that it will be sustainable. We can, make some moves here and there and put some dollars to resources, right? And then next budget cycle, it's gone. If we don't do it together. We've got to do it as a community, and we've got to do it with all of the people that you identified, Jermaine, all of the people you all identified, and I'm hoping that you all will stay willing partners with us as we move through the conversation together. It is definitely going to be tough work, but we have a moral imperative. And I know that whatever, as my words are my words, and I hope that you believe me, I hope that you trust in me based on my past actions, but I also am fully aware of where we are and that actions are required. I'm fully aware of that. I'm also fully aware, that not everybody's going to be supportive. And you know what? I don't care. I just don't care. We have so much work to do, and when I hear the stories, of you talk about your kids, right? Kids are the entire reason I got into this line of work. And it's what keeps me in this line of work. We have, when I think about you letting your children go out for the night, I know what I feel when my children go out at night, and I know how scared I am that they're going to return safely, and that isn't even overlaying the fact of a society and sometimes of a department that isn't protecting them. And I can't imagine that. I cannot imagine that. We have said for a long time that hate is not a Gresham value, that everybody in this community is welcome, that everybody has a role to play going forward. That is where we're at. What is our role going forward? Everybody is in this conversation. Everybody. There is nobody that's not in this conversation. Every single person. Every single person in this community has a role to play. I believe we can get it right. I believe we can get it right. I believe we can get it right. We have Oregon's most diverse zip code. We have spent a lot of time trying to build systems around the communities. But as I said in the beginning, it's short. It's not enough. We are at a moment in time, as has been identified, where it's time to meet the moment. It's time to lead. And I say that to my white brothers and sisters. Enough. You have a responsibility. You have an obligation. And I know so many hearts that want to do good, that are afraid to talk about this stuff because they're afraid they're going to hurt somebody's feelings, or they're going to be, somebody's going to judge their heart and that stuff. And I say to that, enough, get over it. Get your butt in here. Let's break some bread with some people. Let's talk, and let's figure this community out. We will convene, obviously, as many of these as we need to convene. And I don't ever see them going away, to be honest with you. And again, the accountability is the question. It is the question. It is the question which I want you to put on me and on this council. I want that accountability. Okay? I will walk with my brothers and sisters every day, anywhere, anytime. My faith tells me to do that. My God tells me to do that. And I know the hearts of the council, and I know what their heart tells them to do too. So in spite of where we are, we have an absolute incredible opportunity. We have a credible opportunity to reshape systems, to bring people together in a way that I think can be very meaningful. Because I know the hearts of everybody that want to get better. Right? Like, I know the hearts of everybody that wants to get better. The moment demands it, we will meet it. And with that, E.D. Modene.
Social commerce, social capital is the art of the day. Conversations are great, and they're important to change ways, habits. Social cognitive implicit bias is what it is. But until we change systems, laws, procedures, the drum of injustice will keep beating, and we will not see change. So we have to lobby, push, insist, and demand on legislative difference and inclusion. Unless we dismantle the the borrowed constitutionary ways that we felt were amended by the Civil War, and then the Bill of Rights, and then the Civil Rights Act. We still didn't see the change. So we have to understand that there's something even deeper that has to be done. We've got to change the law.
And never give up on hope.
There's another resource called BeTheBridge.com. You can find it on BeTheBridge.com. Really good cohort form of learning. I think it'll be good as well. There's a book that I've used with our staff that is called, that we're actually going through by Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil, called The Roadmap to Reconciliation. I think is really a foundational book as well.
Next question is directed towards the superintendent, so we're here today. Callie R. says, I have 3 kids in the schools. What are your plans to protect my brown kids? What will be done with SROs in schools?
Sure.
It's Katrice Blair, Gresham. For SROs, again, that's for me in Gresham. It is a greater conversation for our community. I do not have that sole authority as the superintendent to remove SROs from our schools. It is a contract with our school board. We will begin those conversations. And since I arrived here in 2017, at the end of every school year, myself, my principals, as well as my safety director, sit down and have conversations with our SROs to recalibrate what's happening and what's going on. Going forward, I know the uniform itself kind of brings some haste for kids, and knowing all the things that are happening now, we're looking at asking our officers to wear the police polos. And we'll continue to have discussions about the deadly weapons that they adorn throughout our buildings. But again, for me, I'm speaking for Gresham, I don't want to speak for Paul. It's a greater conversation in our community because we also knew the reality here in Gresham, Reynolds, Gresham, Park Rose, we've all had school shootings, right? So, and I'm not saying that having an officer will prevent that, But we also know that the response time is critical in those scenarios. And so I think it's a greater conversation in the community, and I'm not in the position to give a yay or nay on that
And
as the superintendent.
I'm in agreement with that. With Centennial, it's the same exact process. Also, we do the same review, and actually, we only have one. And I would say that he's been consistent in building relationships, and when I think about it overall, I feel like calling for help with someone we don't know on an emergency, that first responder in the building is actually going to be more aware of students, staff, and also is just going to be there. But I think it's just an overall process that we would look at and follow, and it's the exact same one that Gresham follows.
Will you allow me to just say 60 seconds? I am grateful to hear these two superintendents say what they said. My concern for the decision that was made in Portland is I didn't hear that young people were consulted. And I think their voice needs to be in the conversation. I have marched the streets in Portland with young people. I have heard them, and in the park, rally. I've heard them say awful things about police. But guess what happens when the school resource officers show up? They're okay. That's the answer. They're okay. And what we know statistically, 92% of the issues that occur in the Portland schools where they're school resource officers, they can manage it right there. And those don't get into the criminal justice system, and all of us ought to know any of our kids getting into the criminal justice system is a mess. And we need to understand, and what I said the other day is just like the crime bill in 1993. Everybody was on board. Everybody's on board. 20 years later, we find mass incarcerations. Guess what? Nobody was thinking about the other side of what happens when you make a decision like this. So I am not in support and in favor of that, and I say that as an educator myself.
I would and I watched all of our students and our students of color giving air high fives to our resource officer who was there for the entire time to make sure that everybody was socially distanced and also that it was a smooth graduation. And I also just want to say, go class of 2020.
The next question, Malcolm P. says, I'm a young black artist who has felt profiled and targeted by white people in East County. What will you do to ensure Black Lives Matter?
I think the first part of that is to making sure that the systems that we have in place that would do that profiling are not doing that, right? That we have this community conversation. We know what has to happen in terms of reform. At least we think we know generally what needs to happen in terms of reform. But to the point that everybody has made, the systems have to change. And until we can in totality change those systems, you're going to have the issues that we have. And so the work of bringing people together, as I see it, and having these conversations, followed by action, followed by plans, followed by, community. And again, I don't think it's, for us, it's not, obviously these are elected leaders of Gresham, but this is a big area, right? Like we have East County where, there's a lot of diversity that resides in other cities too that may not have access to some of the resources that we do. So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're talking about everybody in our region, at least in East County. Because the fact of the matter is, if somebody feels profiled, they're going to feel profiled. If they're not profiled in Gresham but are profiled in another city, that doesn't work, right? When we're going back and forth. So again, I don't have all of the answers other than to bring people together and to try and figure it out as we go forward and make sure that if systems are in place where that's happening, that they're addressed immediately.
I think that for that person, I think he needs to get to know some of the police officers, because the more you engage with them, the more they get to know you, and that's kind of causes a relationship, which is mostly important. What we're talking about is relationships. Because me personally, I will say what I need to say, and I will make sure they know who I am. So the most important thing For the day when they see him, they know, oh, he's okay, he's cool. Outside of them getting out the car and saying, you know.
Let's go deeper.
Because we went through this some years ago, but kind of talk, kind of listen. So what things that happen is make yourself known. And if you feel like once you make yourself known and they have the barrier, there's ways to talk about that. There's ways to address that issue. You're trying to be in a place where you want them to know, I'm okay, knowing you. So when you get that barrier right there, oh, there's something needs to be talked about. That's all I have to say.
You're absolutely right, and we've often said that the validity of a police officer can never just be the badge. It has to be the work that's been done in the community prior to the interaction. And I think Dr. Coakley's iteration of the SRO and the relationship that's built and how that's different proves that point even more to the point that you just said, which is how do we get people in community together more often?
Next question. Michael S. says, I'm a believer who is grieving what I am seeing. What hope can you offer? What can I do for my black and brown neighbors?
I like hearing believers that say, what is it that I can do? The greatest power that any believer has is the power of prayer. As a believer, we need to understand that now faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence for things that are not seen. For by it the elders have received a good report. I'm here to report to you today that there is hope. And not only is there hope, there's power in prayer. So I'm grateful for the believer that asked that question.
I would also say, much like we see in the incarnation of Christ, since it is a believer, the initiative, the divine initiative of God to move toward broken humanity. Yes. I think it is incumbent upon us, those of us that are believers, that we do the work that is necessary to have our souls refreshed. I have lamented, I've been angry, yes. I've been downtown in Portland with young people as yourself and other faith leaders, and at the same time I find myself being renewed and determined to be a solution and to take initiative to move toward the other and not wait for them to move toward me.
I would also suggest that I think it was Steve, a guy. Was it a guy or I'm not sure?
Michael, yeah.
Michael, okay. I would just say that Michael, one of the other things you can do, and I agree with both Pastor Mondane and Pastor Jenkins, that consider convening conversations among your friends that look like you and don't. I would ask that he take the initiative with his parents and family members and neighbors to say, what can we do to try to be supportive and helpful? I'm going to say this as an advertisement to Pastor Mondane, who heads the NAACP. Go to an NAACP meeting. Get involved in NAACP activities. I think you cover this area too, is that right? Yeah. Okay. Also, find your way to the Urban League. There is also a group of young black men called Word is Bond. They would welcome you to give you the opportunity to both be a part and to make sure that you get connected. The last thing I would say, there are different student leaders. What's your name, son? Shamar, and I'm not saying that in any other way than deferential. As an elder, I call every young man a son, okay? So they need to talk to Shamar, and Shamar will give them the rest of the answers. And you guys, you two right here, yeah.
Yeah, to that, Mayor. What I hesitate to share, however, I am an educator. And so it's very hard for me to hold back with these things. And so I would say to anyone who's looking to help, to be an ally and how to help, first you have to be aware of yourself and what your biases are. Understandably, I have them as well, and I have to check myself constantly. I grew up in the Deep South, so I have a heightened awareness of what is going on around me and what I'm doing, where I'm going. I would also encourage individuals who want to help and want to be allies, listen. Listen to your neighbors, listen to your friends, ask, how are they hurting? How can they help? It's not going to be the same for everyone, on how you can help them. But we already know about the systems and the structures, but how do you help that individual? You have to listen and ask that person. I'd always say, acknowledge the fact that systematic racism is in existence itself. And Black lives do matter. And again, that's not to say that anyone else's life doesn't matter, but until Black lives matter, you can't say all lives matter. There's period, end of story, right? The other thing is, when you hear the backhanded compliments, or you think you're complimenting someone, when you add in for a Black person or for a Black woman, I've been asked, I can't even tell you how many times in this community did I get this job because I'm a Black woman. And my response has been, more lately, are you asking me that because you're white? And I know that's an offhanded piece, but don't try and give me a compliment and then in the end say it's because I like to think it's on my merits. I've worked hard for where I've arrived, and I'm here to do a task and a job. And I'm reminded of that job and that task every time I walk into a classroom with my students of color to see the representation. Right? I'm a big girl, I'm hard to miss too. And I'll end with this, it's a quote, and I don't want to misquote Langston Hughes, so I will say this, I will read it, and it's called "Oh America" by Langston Hughes. It's, "Oh America, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, and yet must be the land where every man is free." How do we reach that goal? Those are words that were written decades ago, and we're still trying to live out that creed that we've all been promised. And just because I have some degrees and a job, I know I have not arrived. I'm reminded of that every single day I look in the mirror of who I am. But what I also know is, lastly, I said that 3 sentences ago, is that I can't always be out front. I cannot always be out front. As a woman of color, I know I have to lead from behind in some scenarios, and this is one. So you will not see me out and about doing this, that, and the other, but you gotta know I'm working with the undercurrent. I'm from the deep South now. I mean, we all aspire to be U.S.
Yeah, go ahead, 'cause-
If he's a believer, Stephen is, we need to go as faster, the challenge is faster, and the board, that these conversations also need to be in the church. Absolutely.
I want to chime in on that. So you asked the question, what can we do out here East? There's an organization already out East called Beyond Black. There's programs already out East. Weirdness not necessarily saying you got to go to NAAC. Me and Pastor talk. Urban League, you have an organization right out here representing everything you want Black. Everything you want Black. You already got it right here, right now, already doing this work. Maybe we just small and maybe we don't get all that. We already here. Guarantee y'all brothers already fit. You walk in the door, we got you. That's guaranteed. That's me and you just talked about. I got you. Here we go. You want to represent? What position you want to pick? What you want to do? It's here. It's here right now. Just open up. We'll guide you through them doors because we all here talking about how we going to walk through that door. So when you want to know the answer, we right here. It's right here, right now, happening. Right now, happening. Playground runs here. We do the youth work. You want a job tomorrow? We got you. Right now. Here we go. Right now. Just find it and we'll make it happen in all the school districts. You ask one of them kids want to get hired, we'll put you in the right position. It's happening right now. Right now, as I speak. We're sending what school you want to go to, right? We know the problem in Gresham. We know the problem in Reynolds. We know the problem in Centennial. We know all them problems. We know what's up. They don't look like us. That's why them kids ain't getting the championships. And we just can't care academics. We know what's up. Hire us, look like us, it'll walk through that door. I swear to you. I swear to you. That's what's up.
Mayor, this one is for you. Sharon T says, what work is the city doing around diversity, inclusion, and education? What training is the council and mayor doing?
We're good. It's a good question. I'm going to be real honest about it. We tried to get into diversity, equity, inclusion, and we stumbled and we failed as an organization. A lot of things happened, some of which I don't know, some of which I do, but the bottom line is it failed. It's important to the council that we get it right. It's important to me, and it's important to the community that we re-engage in that work, and that's the work that we are re-engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion, both internally, so that we can have the internal conversation, and then as well as this piece of the framework, how do we do that externally? But I know that we have work to do internally that hasn't been done, and we're late, we're behind, and we need to get back at it. We're going to do that. Larry is leading up from our office is leading up the charge to begin with, and all the way through. And I'm looking forward to the conversations, because I want to hear what Mr. Hennessy said about our employees' experiences, and I want them to be free and unencumbered to talk to us. And it makes it a little challenging under the construct of the governance of the city and the charter, and all that gets a little bit difficult with employees, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. But there's more, a lot of work to be reinstigated, restarted, and we're on the way to doing that.
I would also offer, if I could, Brother
sir.
Mayor,
Yeah.
you've got people like Corey Falls,
Yep.
your deputy city manager, Dr. Holt,
Yep.
Stephen Holt as well.
Yep.
I'm praying that you will utilize their amazing, vast
Yep.
resource and knowledge and experience
Yep.
in this regard as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This next question is for the pastors. Xavier C. says, what support or help are faith-based organizations, churches, and black organizations doing to help black families and people of color? I want to help be an ally.
You know, it would need to be a little more specific. I mean, in what areas? Is that education, healthcare, relief, that type of thing? For us, anywhere that we see deficiencies, anywhere that we see gaps, we're going to do our best to serve those. And so whether it be education, enrichment, healthcare fairs, those type of things. So that would obviously be focused on disadvantaged communities of every kind. So
I would just add thoughts on this as well. Every year for the last 8 years, we've provided, with the partnership of Concordia, tutoring services literally every Monday night, from anybody from kindergarten all the way through high school and college. We're looking for a new partner now. Secondly, we do scholarships every year, both for our young people as well as we adopt 7 schools in the region and provide an opportunity for after high school things. We also are working hand in hand with the Urban League in terms of developing opportunities for young people in job creation and job opportunities, and we're developing relationships with business around the area so that in the summertime, young people have places to go to work, because quite frankly, young people need to be busy. I'll just say that, amen. That's a father coming out, but I'm just going to say that, amen. Go ahead.
I partner with that thought of associating with the Urban League. They have some incredible programs. I know that at Celebration Tabernacle, we have a program called Teach Me to Fish that kind of helps you energize the gifts and resources within yourself to become an entrepreneur or to do those things that you could only imagine yourself doing, and to actually walk into those places. So that's what we offer as well.
The last thing we
Please just come home. I was going to say, just please come home. We do park work right now at the Docker Park. Please come home. We're going to help with the park department. Just come home. Reach out to us. We'll make sure it's okay. Please do, so we can hold them accountable. We will be back in here filling this whole auditorium up. Trust us.
This question is more for anybody. Rosa J says, I am new to East County. What is Oregon's race history, specifically in the Portland region? Where is it at? I am new to East County. What is Oregon's race history, specifically in the Portland region?
I would say that we would not have enough time to all of us to chime in on that, but that information is readily available on the internet. Simply Google, you can find it.
The other thing I would suggest, I don't know whether Dr. Milner is still at Portland State, but if he's not, you can find him. Dr. Daryl Milner, who has done amazing work in this area, has also gone back to show us property titles that specifically say all the way into the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where black people or Jewish people were not allowed to purchase the property. If it was going to be conveyed to anybody else, it couldn't be them, if you will. He's got a plethora of that. But I will also say, just any of us of color, you've heard our credentials, you know what we do, but guess what? When I get in the car, if I get a call for one of our people is in Gresham, Tualatin, Portland, Vancouver, wherever they are, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I know who I am. I know my relationships, but if I'm in a speed zone that says 35, I put on cruise control. Because at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm not sure whether somebody is lurking, and if I am driving just a little bit faster than the speed limit, that I might not get stopped. Same is true about coming to a complete stop at a stop sign and get around the corner and see that there's somebody sitting there. I'm not making this up. This is a reality. And as preachers, as black men, as, you know, perhaps black women as well, and I'll try and speak, Doc, for you, but I know very well we are constantly conscious of who we are, because we are not just in Portland or in Oregon or in Gresham, we are in the United States of America.
Next question. Gene Anderson says, I have seen police and city leaders around the country walk in solidarity with groups and organizations. Does the city of Gresham plan on supporting the movements and marches?
Let me say from my perspective, and I think Councilor Eckel spoke to some of it in terms of her statement that she'll offer for next Tuesday's council meeting, which clearly identifies the need to support peaceful protests. The council, the governance, has been engaged in this process. The council has attended the rallies that have been put on. I spoke at one of them. I know other councilors have been and have spoken. The police department needs to engage in this conversation, and they need to be a willing partner. That is my expectation. That is what the council's expectation is. And to the accountability piece, that'll be what is absolutely expected. I expect our officers to engage with our community. I expect them to understand and hear the voices that were said today and that continue to be said. I do not believe this council has any ambiguity on that. I think there's no ambiguity on that. And that'll be part of the review that we committed to from President Obama's plan, as well as what we're going to commit to as a community together to go through these issues. But my full expectation, and I want to be very clear, my full expectation is that the police department is a willing partner and understands their role in a modern day police department and in the reforms that are going to be necessary to move the community, our society, humanity forward. That's my expectation.
This next question, Cherry W says, I have 4 black boys, all under the age of 10. What should I tell them? What can I do to protect them?
My son's 10 too, and we just have real conversations about things, my personal experiences that I've gone through, so he's aware and he knows what could happen. And also, I think somebody else over there said the camera, or maybe it was over here, the camera needs to be out, and it's powerful. And it's sad to see that that's not going to be 100% safety. That's not going to work. It needs to be a lot of change. But I just have to have those real conversations with my son. He's 10. I worry about him each and every day, just like every other parent, and I worry about all of our kids. And I think as parents, it's up to us to have those real conversations, because that's reality.
And I'll add to that, as I do not have boys, I do have young ladies. And by saying that, I will say to you, as a black mother, I worry about my daughters. I do not have sons. My sister has 4 boys as well. And I can tell you that almost every time we have a conversation, we're having conversations about as her boys grow. And they're 8, 6, and she also has a set of twins like me that are 2. One, I would share that parent works to teach their child about their history and the realities of America. In the black household, there's no such thing as an age of innocence when it comes to especially these sort of things. I can remember being 6 years old. My father was an officer of the law. We wore a uniform every single day, proudly. But he also knew that there were people that were not good people on the force. And he would sit myself and my brother down on a regular basis and talk to us about things. Again, I can remember being 6 years old learning about those kinds of things. But teaching them about the realities and about their own history. Because I will say this as an educator and having worked in the corporate world with McGraw-Hill, the publisher, the history is not correct in the text, in the books. And my skin cringes every time I have a parent demand a textbook, and I'm like, that is not the right place to find the information that you really want, because it has one story, and it doesn't tell the story, our story of our collective United States. So I would share that parent, again, teach your child about their history, teach them about the realities of America. That's not to say that child can't be innocent and do the things that they need to do as a kid. Obviously keep it age appropriate. But now is the time more than ever that we all have to lean in as parents. I would not only encourage that parent, but every parent to lean in with their children and let them know what's going on. It's going to be a challenge for my staff as our students return in the fall on how we deal with this and how we go forward. But it is important that kid knows their history and the history of America. And more importantly, even than that their parent loves them and is supportive.
I would just like to chime in one time, because I have 4 boys. And my job is to keep having that hard conversation where people with titles, right? My job is to keep them safe, is continue to have this hard conversation. Before I came here this morning, I talked to a 75-year-old white man that's a Christian out in Rockwood. We have a relationship. And I'll tell him, and he asked me, Jermaine, what can I do? We're going to continue to have that real conversation. How we have that conversation of where we all going to be safe at, right? Where I'm going to take this conversation, what you're going to do to make sure we all are safe, right? He comes in and says, Jermaine, I want to talk to you. We're going to have that real conversation. That's how we're going to keep these kids safe. Because it's human rights we talking about. Of course we talk about black, but until we all think all of us kids are human kids, this is his talk. Until you care about all our kids, we're talking about human kids. If you keep letting these kids die, then we ain't talking about human kids, right? We're just having a game play. He asked me, you go and say, do you really care? Do you really care? We're talking about a human. Hell with color, human, right? We're talking about you letting these kids die, and you're going to say, what can you do? You better have that conversation before one of your kids die. That's the conversation. That's how we keep them safe. Let's keep having that tough conversation, that hard conversation, not just the conversation. Let's have that real conversation and what we're going to do about it. Because once we leave here, we need to be knowing what we're going to do about this. Not just talking to make us all be peaceful. What are we about to do here right now? Because all kids is involved in this, right? A human conversation. That's how we have that to keep them safe. Let's challenge people and have that tough. I'm talking about the hard, gut-wrenching. Because, Beamers, we know it's going to be some people pushing right now. Like, there's people pushing in this conversation as we have pushing back on us. Right as we speak. There's people pushing. We gotta have that real conversation, that real guard conversation. Everybody here gotta have that conversation. And can we show what we talking about? Action, not talk.
I would echo that. I've raised my children in Eugene, Oregon, and so we arrived here in 1996. And I myself was raised by my great grandfather, who was a descendant of a sharecropper slave up from the South. And one of the things that I recognized that I needed to do to educate, I guess that was the question: how do we educate? I knew that I couldn't leave it to the school system to educate my children on their cultures and their community's contribution to America. And so I wanted them to have a sense of pride. Although obviously I'm a black father, we had the tough conversations that Jermaine speaks of. At the same time, I wanted them to have a sense of pride, a sense of dignity as they went about their lives in a white society, to know that they could hold their head up and that they were the descendants of kings and queens and all of the contributions that our people have made throughout history. And so I took it upon myself to make sure that they had that. And at the same time, I gave them a sense of responsibility to turn adversaries into advocates by the way they conducted themselves in the public space. And so they, to this day, as young adults, are understanding that they're introducing themselves and our culture and our people to someone every day. And I wanted them to carry the weight, not just of Jenkins. It's unfair. And yet I wanted them to know that they were my children and I had an expectation. And yet they had this whole culture, this community that was supporting them, that they could be proud to be a part of. And I wanted them to represent themselves well and comport themselves well in the public space.
One other comment to that, and that is that I've, with our children, both that have been raised in our house, but also at our church, when they bring kids over, their friends that are Caucasian, I've made it clear, if something happens, you're to stay right there. I'm going to talk with your parents to make sure they know that your job is not to walk away, not to run away and be safe and leave our kids right there with the police or with whatever friction is going on, and that Caucasian parents can be extremely helpful to help their kids understand, whether it's when they're in I don't care, K12 all the way into college and high school, college, whatever it is, their job is to also remember, if you're an ally, then stay one when trouble comes.
One more thought I have is, I haven't heard this. I raised 2 twin boys here in Portland. They're 38 years old now. I've got 5 grandchildren. Tell them the truth, and above all, teach them not to fear.
This next question comes from Lori Stegman, the Multnomah County Commissioner, and she says, what is Gresham doing currently around the lack of diversity training?
I think we just answered that in the previous question, but I can repeat it again if that's helpful. The diversity, equity, inclusion team is getting together and ready to launch. Larry has been doing work with getting some folks on board to do the work and to get after all of the work that needs to be done internally. And happy to speak to the commissioner candidly or more directly on that issue as well.
And the last question is, it's a community-based question. How will Gresham endure the discussion won't end here? How can we assure we're making progress, and what checks and balances can be used going forward?
It's a fantastic question, and it is the question, and it's the question that Jermaine has raised a couple times. Where do we go from here? And after today, my intent is to get back together with the Gresham City Council to figure out and to have a conversation together, which makes it challenging with the COVID situation, but I think we'll figure that out. But that is where we are. So more, obviously a definitive more plan. The council will meet Tuesday the 16th, this next Tuesday, where this plan we can talk about going through some of the outlines of the President Obama's plan, set the stage for the accountability piece of that, the review piece of the review of the department. But that again is one piece of the overall larger conversation. So all that to say that the council is ready to get to work. We just need to have a conversation together as a council.
Go ahead. I just got to say, Mayor, can you commit that we're going to have a 30-day plan, a 60-day plan, and a 90-day plan? Because we don't want this to keep going further and further and further, right? Let's get to us some.
Jermaine, I hear you.
Yes.
I am not interested.
Action.
Jermaine, I'm committed to it. I've
Okay.
told you that 3 times. I am not interested in having meetings to have meetings. I'm not interested in having pastels and dot exercises and all that stuff. I'm interested in meaningful, generational conversations that move our humanity to a better place. I'm absolutely, Jermaine, I'm absolutely committed to it. I promise you.
And we all will be back with that. Okay.
I promise you.
Mayor, if I can,
Go ahead.
just to tag on to that, is I read in the beginning our draft statement of truth, intention, and commitment, and that is just one step. And as I said at that time, the council is asking you to hold us accountable to this statement. What's missing in it is the what's, the hows, and the whens, and we recognize that. And there's a lot of work to do that, and time is of the essence. I hear you that we can't just pass this on Tuesday and go, gee, we just did a great job, and then put it on the shelf. We understand that it's one first step, and please do inform, challenge, hold us accountable.
And I'll just add one, again, now more than ever, we need to remain committed to the work that we are doing. What I know about people is that when things become challenging and people question their character, and people get angry and they push back, sometimes people shy away from those type of things. And I will include myself in that category as well. In fact, in my last post as superintendent doing this work, my family had security for 3 months. Now, why would you ask an educator needs security? Because people do not want these things to advance and go forward because of their own benefit. But this time, more than ever, we need to remain committed. And I'm going to quote another great person. This Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a former college athlete. I do emphasize former, which is why I'm paying back all my scholarship money to orthopedics. He shared an article not too long ago in the I think the LA Times, that racism itself is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, and until you let the sun in, then you see it everywhere. As long as we keep shining the light, we have a chance. And that is my thought and my hope.
Something else I would like to add personally to that is it's not just on the mayor and the city council to do something. I think the community also has to do something. You have pastors up here, you have myself, you have Jermaine, Jalen right here. The community, you guys need to get out and go join the protest. You know, go hear what everyone is saying, and you know, you be the change that you want to see. So come to us with ideas. All of us up here, come to us with ideas and voice your opinions and things that you want to be changed. So when we come up here, we can be a voice for you guys to get the community heard and get the changes that you guys want to see in the community.
Okay, further questions, comments, closing thoughts? 3 preachers don't have a closing thought? Yeah, right. And 2 okay.
Well, the educator does, in that I will close with one thought that, you know, racism itself, it needs people to believe in the ideals that of racism. It does not like those who can critically think and think differently. And I'll leave with that.
I would just say that it takes courage to even convene today. And I want to really applaud you. And I know you don't need that from me. But
feels
hang
really
with
awkward.
me. Hang with me. You didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
You didn't have to, counselor, you didn't have to bring this forward, you two, right? But you are. It is those intentionalities that is so important, so that, again, I've said in meetings, all of us who are brown or black have said in meetings, thankful that we're not the ones that have to bring it up. but most often we are the ones that have to bring it up, and people get very uncomfortable when we do. So again, I'm grateful, and again, we're with you as you move forward.
I have a little different take than Pastor Hennessy, and he's heard me say this before. I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm thankful that you're here, but I'm glad to see that you're doing your job. Your job is to show up when we're in trouble. That's what you're paid for. And we sit in these places where we've been instituted as leaders. I'm thankful that you're acting like a leader. And if you can't take any other gratitude in other than that, be sure that we see you doing your job.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I think it was a productive conversation that's going to lead to action, Jermaine. And I look forward to our next steps as a council and as a community. And thank you all for being here. Thank you.